Welcome to the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. And welcome to day 3 of Barca-Week. Episode 2 of Barcelona Week was on the legend that is Samuel Eto'o. And episode 1 on Monday was on the FC Barcelona Training Academy. I hope you've had a chance to check those episodes out and you learnt lots. In this episode, we're going to be speaking about Barcelona's world-famous stadium, Camp Nou, or as it's known in many places in the world, the Nou Camp. Now, just to let you know, this is going to be a bit of a shorter episode than the ones I have recently released. There's only so much I can tell you about a football stadium, but I couldn't possibly do a Barcelona week and not do an episode on one of the most famous stadiums on earth. Now, before we get going with this episode properly, if you're listening with your adults, then fantastic. If you're not, can you do me a favour? Hit the pause button, shout for your adults or go and grab hold of them and see if they could give me 2 minutes of their time. Hello adults, please can I have your attention for approximately 2 minutes? It might be free. If you are already a super listener and supporting the podcast on Patreon, then thank you so very much. You signing up for Patreon helps keep the podcast alive. Each and every episode that I release on the podcast takes me around 8 to 10 hours to make. From researching to writing, to recording, to editing, to mixing and mastering, and then publishing. I love making each and every episode, and I've tried to make Football for Kids a safe and fun place for kids to listen, learn, and be inspired about a topic which they love. So far, I've made over 165 episodes. But without the support of many more people on Patreon, I simply won't be able to keep the podcast going for much longer. So, if you're able to, and please only do it if you are able to, please consider supporting Football for Kids on Patreon, which costs approximately 75p a week. The link for the Patreon page is in the description of this episode. Not only will you be keeping the podcast alive, but there is an exclusive Patreon-only episode released every single week. Thanks, adults. Right then, well, let's get into this episode on Camp Nou. But for this episode, and to save confusion, we will refer to it as the Nou Camp. The Nou Camp is the home of the Barcelona football team. Nou Camp, in English, means new ground or new field. The Nou Camp was built over 70 years ago, and as we speak right now, in May of the year 2024, the stadium is having lots of work done to it, to modernise it and to make the place bigger so it can safely have even more fans in the stadium at one time. The plan for the stadium, when all the work has been done, is to be able to have the ability to have 105,000 people safely watching football matches, concerts and much more. This will make the Nou Camp the biggest football stadium in the whole of Spain and the whole of Europe. Some of you might have been lucky enough to visit Barcelona, and I know there are many of you listeners who live in Barcelona. If you've been to Barcelona, or if you live there, you may have had the chance to go to the Nou Camp, where they regularly give tours of the stadium, and the people who have been will know how mightily impressive the stadium is. The Nou Camp hasn't always been known as the Nou Camp. It initially had the name of Estadi del FC Barcelona, which, when translated to English, is simply the Stadium of FC Barcelona. But it wasn't until the year 2000 that Barcelona members voted for the official name to be the Nou Camp, which has become a name that football fans throughout the world are now familiar with. The Nou Camp is 48 metres tall, which isn't exactly very tall for a football stadium, but to put it in perspective, it's a tiny bit smaller in height than Chelsea's ground Stamford Bridge. However, the Nou Camp over the years has regularly had more than 100,000 spectators in it to watch football. For many years in football stadiums, the majority of the areas were standing, but this became too dangerous and new laws came in across the world to have seating only and safe standing areas. Although the Nou Camp is currently a metre short than Chelsea's ground, it can still seat more than double because of the way that the stadium is built and the shape of it. The seats inside the stadium of the Nou Camp are in the colours of the famous Barcelona kit, and a famous phrase is spelt out via the seats in the stadium on one of the terraces. It says, "More than a club." I think it's fair to say that the Nou Camp is the sort of place that if you were dropped into the stadium from a plane and blindfolded, it would take you approximately 1 second to work out where you were. And because of that, it's a place that travelling players both enjoy playing, but undoubtedly will find slightly intimidating too. In 1982, the FIFA World Cup went to Spain, and the Nou Camp played a major part in hosting the tournament and was one of the most used stadiums for the entire tournament. The Nou Camp was the stadium that hosted the semi-finals, but the finals of the World Cup that year were held in Real Madrid Stadium, which is strange because it didn't hold as many spectators as the Nou Camp did. In that World Cup, quite bizarrely, Spain didn't do too well at all. In fact, they finished bottom of their group, drawing to England and losing to Germany. Many of the Barcelona fans of that time put it down to the fact that they didn't play any games at the Nou Camp and all of their games were played elsewhere. Barcelona have had some fascinating matches in the Nou Camp, and it really is a place that puts magic and football together. But it hasn't just been a place for classic Barcelona matches over the years, but it's been a place that's hosted some fantastic matches involving other teams as well. On this podcast, I have told you the story about Manchester United in the 1999 Champions League final against Bayern Munich, being 1-0 down and coming back in the dying moments in one of the most dramatic and fascinating Champions League finals of all time to win 2-1. But they didn't just win the Champions League when they scored those 2 goals at the Nou Camp, they won the treble. And what a place to do it in. The work that is now in progress at the Nou Camp is to make it even bigger and even better, and it's set to be completed in the year 2026. And the end product is set to make it one of the best stadiums on the planet. I hope that you've enjoyed listening and learning about the Nou Camp. And remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly, or pitch side, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.